Congress must never declare equal those whom God created unequal.
Leave the Constitution alone. We're stepped out upon the world stage now, with the fate of human dignity in our hands. Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment. Now!
Abraham Lincoln has asked us to work with him to accomplish the death of slavery.
No one's ever been loved so much by the people. Don't waste that power.
This fight is for the United States of America.
Can we choose to be born, or are we fitted to the times we're born into?
Well, I don't know about myself. You may be.
Alright, that should have been some of the trailer for Lincoln. This is the new Steven Spielberg film about Abraham Lincoln. And while it's not a biopic, as some people might have thought it might have been, instead it covers the last 4 months of his career, mainly the time period in which he was trying to pass the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, the ending, the abolition of slavery. And it's set in 1865, it's towards the end of the Civil War. Basically, Daniel Day-Lewis, as Lincoln, is trying to secure the vote for the 13th Amendment. He has a number of his own people in his office, as well as some other people he tries to involve in getting basically things to work out his way, which may consist of giving some good speeches, or some good monologues, or just resorting to dirty politics. Sally Field co-stars as his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. Tommy Lee Jones is in there as the character whose name just escaped my mind. Thank you, Thaddeus Stevens. There's a host of people in here. David Strathairn, his Secretary of State William Seward, Joseph Gordon-Levitt stars as his son, Robert Todd Lincoln. Pretty much, as I've said before, everyone that's not in Argo, that's a character actor, is in Lincoln. So there you go. With all that said, I'm going to start with Adam Gentry. What did you think of Lincoln?
Been looking forward to this one for a long time. And, you know, if you sat down and told somebody, hey, so Disney's going to release a movie by Steven Spielberg about Lincoln, and it's going to star Daniel Day-Lewis, it's pretty much what you'd expect. I mean, the only difference would be that I would have thought it was going to be a more inclusive biopic, and I think that the fact that they didn't do that is really positive. And that Tony Kushner deserves a lot of credit for focusing in. I mean, think about it. You sit down and you're like, hey, okay, so we want you to write Lincoln. Okay, go. And that's a pretty daunting task. And for him to focus it in on such an interesting part of Lincoln's career is really interesting because, and I just used interesting twice there, in case you were counting. It was really fast and annoying. But I mean, it's really cool the way that you see a different side to Lincoln. You see sort of the political gamesman, like you mentioned, Aaron, you know, him playing dirty politics and just getting his feet dirty in his hand and just getting in the mire and swinging. I mean, it's the kind of movie, at least as far as I'm concerned, that you really like for sentimental reasons. Because, I mean, it kind of gives you what you expect it to give you. It pulls on the heartstrings at the places you expect it to pull on the heartstrings. The music swells at the places you expect it to swell during the different speeches and whatnot. Daniel Day-Lewis is really, really fantastic, and he's masterful. It's hard to throw more praise on that guy because you think he'd already said it all, but he's fantastic. So, I mean, I don't think this is one of Spielberg's masterpieces or even one of his more interesting films, but it's the kind of movie that really just rewards you exactly as you think it would, and I'm grateful for that.
I'm going to jump in, even though I generally like to go last, but because I completely agree with what you just said, Adam, and I enjoyed this movie for a number of reasons, which I'll get into later, but I've been following the idea of Lincoln as a movie from Spielberg for quite a while, and I remember very early on Tom Hanks was like rumored to be Lincoln, and then obviously Liam Neeson was like officially cast as Lincoln, and then that didn't happen. Then you got Daniel Day-Lewis, and he just, I mean, we'll be singing the praise of Daniel Day-Lewis for a while. I don't know if he's necessarily going to like win the Oscar for Best Actor, but he's certainly going to be up there, and he's going to, you know, the betting pool starts now on, you know, whether or not he's going to win, but he's pretty amazing as the character. That said, I really like Tommy Lee Jones in this movie as well, and I mean, yeah, there's a lot of points I want to get into, but mainly I did enjoy this movie. I enjoyed it mainly for the more political intrigue going on in it, opposed to the familial stuff that I think is more added on, if anything. But I do think the movie's well made. I think it may run longer than it has to, and while it has this kind of structure that I like to see in a movie in terms of how it's focused on just this period in Lincoln's life as opposed to being an entire biopic on Lincoln, which I don't think any movie, even if it's 2.5 hours, could do kind of proper justice to while making it, completely interesting unless it involves vampire hunting. But, overall, I did enjoy this movie. I agree with Adam. I don't think it's one of Spielberg's greatest or most interesting, but I think it's a very competent film, which is what you can easily expect from someone like Steven Spielberg making it, and I think it's quite worth checking out for sure. Mark?
Okay, well, so as you sort of telegraphed, I think Daniel Day-Lewis is amazing as Lincoln. I mean, we don't have video records to tell us, how he spoke and acted, and, where we have to kind of guess. I think Daniel Day-Lewis does a flawless job at sort of embodying his temperament and, the way the pitch of his voice, and he makes a lot of decisions that may even seem a little bit, they're decisions that he has to make that with the performance that isn't one that we've seen in previous incarnations of Lincoln, like Henry Fonda and stuff. But I think that Daniel Day-Lewis' portrait becomes the definitive portrait. He's amazing, and he's riveting. So as far as his performance is concerned, I absolutely, really loved it. He will be nominated for sure, and whether he wins, that's up in the air. But he's definitely the reason to see this film. I do have to, congratulate Spielberg on his chutzpah, because he takes a period of history and doesn't set it on the battlefields of the Civil War, but rather in the political chambers of Washington. And it's really a most uncommercial movie in that it rings drama simply over the deliberation of an idea. And everything, basically the whole action has to do with Lincoln's desire to obtain 20 Democratic votes or abstentions for the 13th Amendment. That's the action. And so, in one sense, I really have to admire Spielberg's ability to take this very narrow idea and make a 2.5 hour movie out of it. So I did admire the film very much, and overall I would, give it a recommendation. But I don't think it's an easy film to really love. I think there are parts to it that do drag, and it is a very sort of specific point of view that Spielberg has decided to take. And he took a book, Doris Kearns Goodwin, a book called Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. And while that book actually dealt with the entire presidency of Abraham Lincoln, they've decided to just focus on this one aspect. And I can admire that, especially Adam, you've said, it's a focus, and it's sort of interesting that he decides to just talk about this one narrow area. That gives him the ability to really delve into this discussion of the 13th Amendment. But I did find myself at times sort of wishing, wow, I wish it had been a little bit more than just this one aspect. But again, definitely a well-done job. And for people who are into that kind of political discussion, they're going to really enjoy this film. But for those who aren't into that, they should not watch this film. I don't think they would enjoy it.
Alan, I'll let you go in just a second. I just want to add something. It's not opinion either way. It's just more just on the story. It's with the screenplay for the story. One of the reasons it took so long is because they did not know what kind of story they wanted to tell, and Tony Kushner, along with others,
John Logan for a while.
John Logan,
was rejected.
There was many drafts of Lincoln and they finally kind of put this one together and went with this period of his life. Like there's a whole draft written on based on that entire book on the
and Kushner's first draft was 500 pages.
Yeah, it was super long. So they finally just settled on this specific period. But we can get into that more later. Alan, what did you think of Lincoln?
I haven't really talked about it with anybody, so this is really exciting. I think it's Spielberg's best movie since Munich. I think that Daniel Day-Lewis is fantastic and amazing, and the thing that I think that really worked for Daniel Day-Lewis in this film as Lincoln is that he wasn't plain view. He wasn't the butcher. He wasn't these big, bombastic Daniel Day-Lewis performances that we're used to, that we're familiar with. at some point I think a lot of us are expecting. He's very subdued, he's very settled, he's very quiet, he's very meticulous as Lincoln. And it's when he gets, there's a scene in the trailer where he's talking about now, and making everything happen, and then it kind of crescendos to the next scene about saying he is the President of the United States and he wields immense power. It's when he decides to finally go to that moment at Lincoln that you start feeling how important it is to him. Because from what I understand from Lincoln and the history of what I've read, and Team of Rivals is just one of my favorite books, he was very meticulous in how he dealt with people, how he was a political shark, and how he did things. So kind of seeing how Daniel Day-Lewis kind of almost pulled itself back from being the Daniel Day-Lewis actor that we know and actually coming out and being the subtle, nuanced Abraham Lincoln kind of worked better. And he let other actors kind of steal the show almost. Because I think that Tommy Lee Jones is fantastic as Thaddeus Stevens, and I think he has some of the better moments in the film. And Lee Pace, and also James Spader and Justin Hawkes, and Criminy, what's his name?
James Spader? You said him.
No, James Spader.
The guy that was in Serious Man.
Michael Stuhlbarg.
Yeah. No, Michael Stuhlbarg was fantastic too. He had a very, very important role. All these people, even Gale from Breaking Bad, everybody had their moment. There was, what's his name? Tim Blake Nelson. Those three guys.
John
have
Hawkes.
a lot of, yeah. They all had, those are some of my favorite scenes, especially when, they dealt with a lot of different characters in the film. And it was kind of almost they brought in moments of levity, but it's also incredibly important. And the fact that they focused on the political, aspect of getting that 13th Amendment changed in that aspect and in that environment, to me, was more interesting than putting it on the battlefield. Because we've seen that movie. We've seen Glory. We've seen countless other Civil War films, and I don't really want to see that. I don't particularly care to see that anymore. I want to see what Lincoln did and how he talked and how he dealt with the people around him. I love this movie. I don't know if you guys can tell. There's only one or two kind of slow parts, but the thing that kind of showed me that I didn't really like was Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Because he's a cool guy, I like watching him in movies, but you kind of see how short he is as an actor when he has to act against Daniel Day-Lewis.
You drafted half the men in Boston. What do you think their families think about me? The only reason they don't throw things and spit on me is because you're so popular. I can't concentrate on British mercantile law. I don't care about British mercantile law. I might not even want to be a lawyer.
It's a sturdy profession. And a useful one.
Yes, and I want to be useful.
When he has to act against these other great actors around him. Jared Harris barely saying anything around him, just kind of acts circles around him just by being Grant.
Just by being Jared Harris.
Just by being Jared Harris, he kind of shows, like, honestly, I'd be humbled if I was Joseph Gordon-Levitt walking onto that set. I almost wanted to take him apart because it would have made me look as novice as he did. Because how good of this movie is. It was fantastic, and I enjoyed it, and I could talk about it for a long time. What's up, Aaron?
So let's get into that a little, because Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is an actor I think we all like.
I like him.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I don't think it's necessarily his fault, as, regarding, like, his talents as an actor, like him versus, veteran actors in this film, but I don't think his character is really necessary in this movie. That's one of my biggest things about the movie. I get why he's there, and I get what he means and how he factors into the story, but I also think having him kind of drags the movie down, and I think it feels like an added element that doesn't add a whole lot to it.
I think he has, Joseph Gordon-Levitt kind of has the Scarlett Johansson problem from about 2004, 2000, in the mid part of the last decade, where his star power is going a bit further than his talent at the moment. And he's a capable actor. He's a good actor. He's nice to watch. But he's getting cast, his star power is putting him in all these movies that maybe he's not quite best suited for.
I don't think that. I mean, for one thing, I think he's far more charismatic than Scarlett Johansson was when she was suddenly getting all these big roles and things. But I don't think it's a problem with the fact of how he's acting in this movie. I just don't think the part that he has in this movie is necessary. I don't think the movie gives him much to do, and I don't think it even kind of satisfies his plot thread in this movie.
I think one of the reasons why Spielberg, I think that subject is interesting to Spielberg, the relationship between a father and a son.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
You look at his movies, a lot of times it's about the relationship or the absence of a relationship. So that was something that spoke to Spielberg, so that's probably why that aspect was put into the film.
Yeah, and it's completely not surprising to me the fact that there is a theme involving fathers and sons in this movie.
No.
But at the same time, I was far more intrigued by the stuff going on in the White House and what's going on, with the amendment and whatnot. And I see basically Robert Lincoln comes in, his son comes in, and he's finished school and he wants to serve in war. He wants to be a man. And Lincoln doesn't want to do that, and that's kind of where that arc goes. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this, even though.
But I think it fits though. Because you have the whole stuff with Tad, which shows Lincoln's tender side, and him kind of running away from the past and his wife, and then you have the specter of their dead son Willie, and then I think you need to have Robert there as that kind of that impetus for the conflict between Mr. and Mrs. Lincoln, and they're talking about, well, we can't lose another child, but we can't hold him back. So, I mean, I think I would disagree that the part is unnecessary.
I think it's good to have a few. I mean, I don't know what you would replace it with.
Exactly.
But it's good to have it's good to have some aspects that aren't having to do with the discussion of a bill, just to kind of break up the action a little bit.
That's my problem with it, and I guess it's just inherent to how the film structured that I just didn't like, because I don't know how else you'd handle something like that, because obviously he is a role in Lincoln's life. His son is there. And so I don't know how you avoid that and just completely shut it out.
He could have easily not even addressed that. I mean, even the assassination is barely addressed at all. And even Lincoln's relationship with his wife, there's a whole movie just in that. And this movie doesn't even really deal with that. So he could have kind of sidestepped that. I mean, if he wanted to.
That's true. And there's another thing, and I want to get to the more positive stuff I think about this movie too, but I was not a big fan of Sally Field in this movie. And I think it's because she talks, her character, Mary Todd Lincoln, who eventually doesn't necessarily go crazy, but she
becomes agitated.
Her mental state isn't as good after the son's done. But, she talks about how she doesn't want to be remembered as, this person who is crazy, basically. And I admire that, except Sally Field does nothing but give us reason for me to think that she's crazy in the movie.
But I mean, don't you think it was an honest? I'm not a huge Mary Todd Lincoln scholar, but from my impression, I mean, I think it was accurate to the kind of person she was.
It's accurate to parts of her personality, but I don't get that. Besides, one scene that she has where she's confronting Tommy Lee Jones, there's not a whole lot.
Which was awesome.
There's not a whole lot that counts as the other side of
See, I disagree again. I really thought it was nuanced in that she was accused of being crazy and whatnot, and yet she's trying to say, listen, I wasn't crazy. I was dealing with grief, and there's a difference.
I'll support you, Adam. I actually think that Sally Field's performance was good. I mean, I didn't think she didn't come off as crazy. I know I'm not a scholar on her either, but I know that she is viewed as crazy by history. But I didn't feel I thought that the part had more nuance, and I actually saw her side of it. So I appreciated what Sally Field brought to the part. And I will mention that, which is kind of fascinating, Mary Todd Lincoln was actually much younger in real life than Abraham Lincoln. But in this film, she's, much older. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting casting choice. And I know there was some controversy about it originally when they were casting for her, because she had to really lobby for the part. Yeah. I think they made a good decision. I think she's good.
They cast her when they had Liam Neeson, and they were a better match. That's
But I will take up for her. I thought she was valid.
Okay, go on.
Two things. I think she was fine. Historically, Mary Todd Lincoln was bat crazy. That's the idea, is that she's just insane. Right. But in the film, it's just. She lost Willie. They're over coddling Tad, and they want to make sure that their other one doesn't get killed in the war as well. So she's dealing with a lot of things, plus the stress of being the first lady. It's a lot to deal with, and I think historically, with all the things that were written about her, where she was very outspoken, she wasn't comfortable standing behind Lincoln. She wanted to be at his side. So I think in the idea of misogyny and everything around the 1860s is that they were painting her in a bad picture with everything that was written about her because she decided to speak up and because she decided to say something. And I think the idea and the legacy of Mary Todd Lincoln isn't fair to her because she had to deal with the grief of losing a child. She had to deal with trying to make sure that Lincoln goes through this tough time. She has a husband who has a nation that's torn in two and killing each other. So this idea that Mary Todd Lincoln was crazy or that she wasn't crazy. She just had to deal with a grieving kid and she had to deal with all these other things and deal with a husband who has a nation torn in two. Like, what I was trying to say earlier is that in the middle of the 18th century, you have a lot of people who were political enemies of Lincoln. And what they were going to do to go after Lincoln was to make his wife seem insane. So with the election just happening, you're going to make him seem weak in whatever way you can. So what are you going to do? You're going to go after an easy target like his wife. It was just bad political dealings. As you can see from all the chamber meetings that they had and in the House of Representatives, they are cold-blooded. They went for the jugular. They wanted to win because there was so much at stake for them as much as it was for Lincoln. So you're going to find any way you can take Honest Abe down a peg, and that's by going after his wife, who wasn't scared of showing emotion. She wasn't just going to be a quiet woman in the back. She was going to be a woman who lost her son, a woman who isn't scared, as you can see from that scene with her and Thaddeus Stevens in the middle of the reception. She didn't care about going after Thaddeus and telling him the way it is in front of everyone.
Mrs. Lincoln.
Madam President, if you please. Oh, don't convene another subcommittee to investigate me, sir. I'm teasing. Smile, Senator Wade.
I believe I am smiling, Mrs. Lincoln.
As long as your household accounts are in order, madam, we'll have no need to investigate them.
You have always taken such a lively, even prosecutorial interest in my household accounts.
Your household accounts have always been so interesting.
Yes, thank you. It's true. The miracles I have wrought. I have fertilizer bills and cutlery invoices, but I had to.
So, I liked the role a lot. I think Sally Field did great, but it was kind of oddly cast. But I still think she was fantastic.
For her to stand up to Thaddeus like that actually shows that she was sort of a strong woman, and you know, I don't know. I thought that given her what she was going through in her life, you know, many people would be stressed out and have a hard time. So I understood her character. I thought I didn't have a problem.
I just always love scenes where people are honest with one another, that they have really strong feelings about. And I just like that. Just, I mean, in our own lives, obviously, the personal and the professional, you have to have this difference and you have to be nice and whatnot. But that's one reason why I think people like Westerns so much, is because, you know, I can't go shoot the guy that's causing me trouble, but Clint Eastwood can. You know, and I always admire scenes, whether it's something like that or whether it's something like, again, Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano in There Will Be Blood, and just that level of honesty and not caring what other people think or what the consequences are, but just that commitment to just expressing yourself and getting it all out there.
I have more I could say, but I don't want to. I don't want to move on from Sally Field. The element that I liked the most about this movie, I feel like Kushner was almost channeling like Sorkin in the way he was writing scenes. I like there's a lot of overlapping dialogue that I really enjoyed how a lot of these scenes were coming together. To have all these different people in office or whatever, kind of discussing what's going on and how things are going, but like in a way that was almost Westling like in approach, but has the language of old that fits the time period that they're in. And I was into this. I was into that a lot. I really liked David Strathairn as Secretary of State William Seward. I enjoyed his performance. I enjoyed how he was kind of grounding things for the rest of the people that were involved in scenes, especially with Lincoln, who's giving saintly monologues every now and then.
And he might have had the best hair too, Strathairn.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thought.
Not Lee Pace?
Lee Pace had fantastic hair.
It was so lush.
But I think Strathairn looked more realistic. He wore it better.
I guess. Lee Pace had fantastic hair. No, one of the things I really liked about the movie is his team of rivals, his cabinet, the people that were around him every day. They kind of didn't see Lincoln like everyone else saw Lincoln. Like in the first scene, the cold open, when it's the two black Union soldiers and the two white Union soldiers. I have
something to comment on that too.
Okay. They kind of saw him as something like the second coming of Christ. He is except for one black dude, but that's different. But like the idea that everybody kind of sees Abraham Lincoln as something more than just a president. But then you get to the moments where his cabinet just kind of don't take him seriously. Like Abraham Lincoln starts telling a story, and he just leaves. He's just like, ugh, I can't do this right now. And I like that. I kind of like the kind of taking him down a peg, like the kind of making him a person, which I think was really, really important. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, it would have to do with Tony Kushner's dialogue. I think every once in a while you can see the perspective of a modern voice behind the dialogue. And that opening scene where the 4 soldiers recite the Gettysburg Address right back to him verbatim like fanboys. I mean, there's a whole book on the fact that the Gettysburg Address was the speech that nobody knew for many years. And it wasn't until years and years later that people kind of like unearthed this speech and kind of like learned it. So the believing that these 4 soldiers would be able to do such a thing at that time is pretty unbelievable. But
it's a super Hallmark moment.
It is. And when I even watching it, I'm like, oh brother, this is kind of
like we're in for a long movie.
Yeah, most of the dialogue, actually I think the dialogue is great for the most part, but every once in a while there are certain things that kind of stuck out to me. There's also another scene, I think, where they're debating the bill and they say, oh, you want to make slaves free, what's next? Giving women the right to vote? And I was like, oh, okay, this is, this is
exactly what's next, yeah.
This is a humorous comment meant for a modern audience.
You mentioned the opening scene involving the Gettysburg Address. Right before that is actually my favorite scene in the movie, which involves the two black soldiers, one played by David Ayala, who is in that terrible Red Tails movie. But I really like the way Lincoln's introduced into this movie because he's basically just kind of sitting somewhere and 2 soldiers are addressing him, and the black soldiers are talking about how they're getting less pay than the white soldiers, and it involves that overlapping dialogue style, which I like, but it also the way it paints Lincoln and how he's just kind of suddenly brought into this movie. He's like telling the black soldiers, he's telling the one in particular about how addressing the fact that they're getting less pay, and what he's telling them, he's basically kind of bullshitting them in the way he's talking to them, and just to kind of satisfy these guys' argument, and the main one that's David Ayala's character, he understands that, and they have this kind of shared expression on both their faces. I just really like how that kind of thing is set up, and that's something I like about a lot of this movie in general. Aside from some of the kind of more, not heavy-handed, but more informed moments, I think there's a lot of things that go on within Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in particular that are, I like how they're framed. I like how they're put together. I like how it works in the realm of this film that doesn't make it seem like it's too much of a heavy-handed film in general or too much of a film that feels like it's supposed to be about something. I don't feel like it's trying to be that as much as you would expect from a film directed by Steven Spielberg about Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, there's a great scene. One of the scenes that I really appreciated the most was when he gets off the carriage and is walking into the house, and he stops and has a little talk with his wife's servant. And it's fascinating because, people look back at Lincoln now, and there's this tendency to basically, he's pretty much, Saint Lincoln, as far as people are concerned, and they just see him as this bastion of, racial equality and whatnot. Well, what I love about that scene is, he basically talks to her and he's like, look, I don't really know black people. I don't really know you. And she says to him, well, okay, how are you going to accept it? And he says, well, I guess I'll get used to you. And I really like that because, instead of, putting him up on this pedestal and whatnot, it takes him down a notch, and it shows that, by contemporary standards, the guy was a bit of a racist. He believed that whites were superior to other races. And I like the fact that when it would have been all too easy just to kind of keep everything going on this one note of, St. Abe,
right,
to kind of show the three-dimensionality of his character in a way they didn't have to. And I love that they took that attention to detail.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think actually Tommy Lee Jones and his relationship with Lincoln kind of shows that a little bit too, because Tommy Lee Jones is kind of the modern audience, like, blacks and whites are equal. They're inherently equal. And I won't go into it, but there's a thing that has to do with he has to temper his opinion in order to, get this bill passed. And that's really politics. Sometimes you have to kind of, I'll concede this if, we can at least get this thing passed. And that was sort of an interesting discussion,
And he tempered it in such a way as to not betray his principles.
Right.
He gave his argument. I loved that.
That's why Tommy Lee Jones gets my vote for Best Supporting Actor so far, because I think Tommy Lee Jones...
if he's not nominated, there's something...
I think he's absolutely fantastic in this movie, and people may laugh it off with Tommy Lee Jones and his wig, even though it's true to character, but he's great in this movie, and I think he's doing more than just being, Tommy Lee Jones, which many people can accuse him of being in more recent films, I guess. But I think Tommy Lee Jones does a lot with this character in a fight, and it's a fiery performance that I really enjoy, and I really love that scene where he just, sucks in his pride and tells the Democrats to go screw themselves. It's just awesome.
I actually entrust everyone to go on to Wikipedia and look up Tommy Lee Jones' character, the guy that he's playing. He's a funny-looking guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like scowling in his Wikipedia picture.
And he gets a lot of the movie, one thing to know about this movie, it's not like a stuffy period drama. There's a lot of humor in this movie. It's very much a Spielberg film, which means it's entertaining to watch, I would say. I don't think it's the one that I'm going to revisit all the time, but I think it's an entertaining movie to watch. I don't think I would hesitate to say it doesn't feel long, because it is long, but it doesn't feel like a movie where it's like a chore to watch this entire thing. I feel like
and it's cool to see the first family having to do their own, stuff. I mean, he's stirring the fire himself, and then they're doing all this different stuff, and this very informal look at what's become a very formal institution.
With that said, Aaron, I do think that this movie is not for everyone, and I think there are a lot of people that will walk out of this movie not enjoying it. We've pretty much discussed it to the point where you're going to know whether you're going to enjoy this movie, but it's not an easy film to enjoy. Like I said in my original discussion, I really admire it a lot, but I didn't walk out of it like, oh wow, I didn't have the feeling I walked out of Skyfall, like what a great, enjoyable time at the movies. It was more like, that's an interesting period of history that I got a very intelligent discussion of.
Now here's my next question. Would you, if this was like the full-blown biopic on Abraham Lincoln, do you think you would have preferred a movie like that?
I think what we got was exactly what we needed. Like, a birth to death biopic. I don't need to see that. I can read
I don't really find those interesting in general.
Yeah. I'm good. Yeah. Well, like Mark, you were saying, Skyfall was a very entertaining movie. Skyfall was a movie that was like, yeah, that was a fun time. I like my popcorn and stuff like that. What Lincoln did for me was, wow, I gotta get back on track. I gotta start making movies.
Right, or made you think.
It's a movie that makes me want to make movies. And those are becoming rarer and rarer for me.
I found a lot more emotion in Lincoln than I ever did in Skyfall.
Yeah.
This one really moved me on an emotional level, much more than Skyfall ever did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to propose that Skyfall is a deep movie.
No, I know what you're trying. I know what you were trying to say.
I value all different types of films, and I can raise a frivolous popcorn movie if it does its job well, as just as high as a movie that's attempting to, explain a piece of history. So, anyway, I don't know.
Oh, certainly.
Now, while the movie is focused on one period in the life, I do think I'm not going to say it's overstuffed necessarily, even though I already explained my issues with some of the familial stuff. But I do think it goes on longer than it has to. I think there are a couple moments where, and I think this is a problem, and we can probably discuss this when we talk about Spielberg next, but I think this is a problem that Spielberg's generally had as well in this third act, where he can't seem to find an ending. I feel like the movie ends exactly where you figured it might have ended, as opposed to where I think was appropriate to have it end.
You're saying it should have ended sooner?
I think it should have ended sooner, but instead it ends where I think many people going into a movie called Lincoln expected it to end. Yes.
Right. Well, and I guess I don't know if these are spoilers, so maybe I can't.
Spoilers for history, Lincoln gets assassinated in the theater. Go on.
What?
Was it the butler?
Yeah.
I was waiting for someone to walk up to Mrs. Lincoln and say, so other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? But, okay, so seriously. I read somewhere that said he wasn't going to deal with that. Like, he wasn't even going to talk about the assassination, that he didn't even feel like that's been done to death and we don't need to do it. And he doesn't depict it in the way that we expect, but it is mentioned, and that is how it ends. So he did. I mean, I agree with you, Aaron. I think he could have just ended it sooner and not even dealt with that, because that's not really what the film was about.
I think
you ended it with him walking down the hall, going out to the carriage.
I mean, that's one place it could have been. But I think there's one end. I think there's an ending shot there, or there's a shot on a particular character towards the end.
With Sally Field, or
no, with another character that I think would have.
The butler.
Not. I think there's another main character in the movie who has a shot in the film after something happens that I think the movie could have ended on instead, which seems more.
Oh no! I know what you're going for, and I gotta completely disagree. Out of work.
It might have been way too much, but there are several moments in this movie where I figured the credits could have come up.
So it has a little bit of a Return of the King problem, you're saying?
I don't find that a problem, because that movie needs to have the story closure, not just like end because you want it to. But that's the whole Lord of the Rings debate we can get into. But I feel like it does go on longer than it has to. Yes.
Yeah, I think the speech at the end, like there's a bookend, and I don't think that needed to be there, but that's fine.
Well, because it's less dramatic or less depressing than where it could have ended, I guess. If you go one scene short of that, then yeah.
I don't care.
Him to the Ages was a pretty great ending, a pretty great closing line.
I do like how it's addressed. I do like how the movie itself picks up after the Gettysburg Address. Like, it could have been incredibly something to do, start on him giving that speech, which I think also could have been something that was assumed by people in this movie. But I do like how things are handled from a different perspective than ways they could have been, which is something that like a show like Rome on HBO did. There's when that just to call back to Rome, when that series talks about Caesar's death and the speech that was given by Brutus, like it handles it in a way that I thought was very clever. Same thing with like Mad Men, the way it handles like the JFK assassination. Like there's ways to approach these kind of things that I admire, and I think Lincoln does that to an extent.
Like, honestly, the writing and the structure of the film is pretty good for me. Like, I haven't seen a film this well written since Hitch. Yay.
I like how we haven't talked about the technical aspects of this movie, just because I think we can agree that they're probably amazing. I think.
Yeah.
You know what? One thing I love is that I think maybe Daniel Day-Lewis already sort of suggests Lincoln to begin with, but I love that the makeup is not even, it's invisible. You just, here he is, and you never question the makeup.
Euclid's first common notion is this: things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. That's a rule of mathematical reasoning. It's true because it works. Has done and always will do. In his book, Euclid says this is self-evident. You see, there it is, even in that 2,000-year-old book of mechanical law. It is a self-evident truth that things which are equal to the same thing are equal to each other.
You forget in a large part that it's Daniel Day-Lewis, and I mean, it's so hard to do that anymore with actors. You see the actor, and it's like, well, no, there's a couple shots where he kind of holds it a certain way, and you're like, oh, okay, I can see Daniel Day-Lewis there, but for the most part, it's just like, yeah, this is Lincoln. Here we go.
Yeah, no, I
never saw Daniel Day-Lewis. I saw Abraham Lincoln. They exhumed him from his grave and and reanimated him and put him in the film. That's how I felt.
Would you say that Daniel Day-Lewis was perhaps more Lincoln than Lincoln?
I would, actually.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, this makeup, costume designs. I mean,
that's all great.
Yanis Kaminski's cinematography, very white at times. Just a lot of open window shots in this movie, but I mean, yeah, it's a good looking movie. There's a shot in the beginning that it's like the only. Well, there's one other scene that involves some of the carnage of war, but there's a shot at the beginning of this movie that involves the Civil War, and just the way that's portrayed in a PG-13 movie, it's like, well, I don't need to see another Civil War epic, but Jesus, Spielberg knows how to shoot a scene like that, because it's pretty.
That's a little bit of Saving Private Ryan influence.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, John Williams' score, not like crazy present in this movie, or at least I wasn't like, that's what that score sounds like, but like, it's there and it's like effective enough.
It's there.
It's there. I mean, it's no War Horse, right?
I would say.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, the movie, from a technical perspective, yeah, like Spielberg's direction in this movie, I think is solid.
Oh yeah.
Any other thoughts on Lincoln? I know I don't want to rush it, but I know Mark Hoban has to leave soon, so I want to at least involve him in some of our Spielberg discussion in general.
I think we can move on.
Okay, so let's get to our rating. Each week on Out Now with Aaron and Abe, we try to rate films based on when you should go and see them. This reminds me, I'm really upset that I wasn't able to talk about Abe Lincoln with Abe present, but whatever. Our rating scale goes from IMAX to theater to dollar theater, Netflix, HBO, TV, or just kind of forget about it. Start how we started. Adam Gentry, how would you put it on that scale?
I'd go with theater.
I would say theater as well. Mark?
Dollar theater.
Alan?
Mark. Theater.
What's that?
Nothing. Dollar theater, really?
Yeah.
So good. Watch it on a big screen with all the awesome. At least look at the Janusz Kaminski cinematography. It's beautiful.
Well, that's why he said dollar theater, not HBO. So he's still seeing it on a theater.